Welcome to the story of a man who painted beauty with pain. A man who turned loneliness into light, who gave the world over 2,000 paintings, but died believing he was a failure. He never saw fame. He never felt success. He was rejected, misunderstood, and left alone in silence. But he never stopped painting. He painted until the very end, not for money, not for fame, but because his soul was screaming for color. This is not just a story about art. It's a story about what happens when the world doesn't understand you, and you keep creating anyway. It's about finding meaning inside madness, about how pain can be powerful, and how beauty can survive even if the artist does not. Vincent Van Gogh's life was full of struggle. But from that struggle came some of the most powerful, emotional, and unforgettable paintings in human history. He didn't paint what he saw, he painted what he felt. And that's what made him immortal. So get ready for a story that will touch your heart, break it, and rebuild it again with every brushstroke. And yes, this video is also great for your English. As you listen, you will hear real emotional English used in the most powerful way. It will help you understand deep vocabulary, practice listening, and feel every word. So sit back, turn the lights down, and let me tell you the story of Vincent van Gogh, the man who painted his pain. Part 1. A Quiet Boy in a Cold World, 1853 to 1873. Let us begin. Not with paintings, not with colors, but with silence. Because Vincent van Gogh's story begins in silence. He was born on March 30th, 1853, in a small village called Zundert in the Netherlands. The weather was often gray, the fields were flat, the winds were cold. But the silence wasn't just outside. It lived inside him. Here's something most people don't know. Vincent was born exactly 1 year after his parents' first son died. A baby also named Vincent. That child had died during birth. So when the second Vincent was born, they gave him the same name, the same birthday, the same place. Can you imagine growing up with your own name already written on a grave? Every time he walked to church, he passed a tombstone with his name on it. It said, Vincent van Gogh, born March 30th, 1852. Died March 30th, 1852. He was born into grief, not joy. He didn't just carry his name. He carried the ghost of a brother he never knew. Vincent's father was a Protestant pastor, strict and cold. His mother was serious, focused, and deeply religious. Vincent was not playful. He was not easy to raise. He was sensitive, quiet, and different. He liked to walk alone in fields. He stared at flowers for hours. He talked more with nature than with people. Other children didn't understand him. Teachers didn't understand him. Even his parents didn't understand him. But he had one light in his life. His younger brother, Theo van Gogh. Theo was kind, gentle, and always listened. He believed in Vincent, even when no one else did. This bond between two brothers would become one of the most important relationships in art history. Without Theo, there would be no Vincent. And that's not a metaphor. That's a fact. But as a child, Vincent didn't dream of being a painter. He didn't believe he was good at anything. At 11, his parents sent him to a boarding school. He hated it. He was bullied. He wrote letters home begging to come back. But his father said, "You must become a man." Vincent obeyed. He always tried to be what others expected. He wanted to please his father. He wanted to be useful. He wanted to matter. But no matter how hard he tried, he always felt like a failure. At 16, Vincent began working for an art dealership called Goupil and Siey. His uncle helped him get the job. He was sent to The Hague, later to London, and then to Paris. For the first time, Vincent touched art every day, but not by painting it. He sold it. And for a short time, he was happy. He walked through the streets of London with a book in his coat pocket. He fell in love with a woman named Ursula, the daughter of his landlady. He dreamed of marrying her. He told her how he felt. She laughed. She said she was already engaged. Vincent's heart shattered. He didn't understand. He thought love would come if you were honest. But the world wasn't fair. The world didn't care. That rejection hit him hard. And it stayed. After that, Vincent's behavior changed. He became serious, strange, obsessed with religion. He stopped caring about selling art. He stopped talking to customers. He began quoting Bible verses at work. Soon he was fired, but he wasn't angry. He thought, maybe this is a sign. So he decided to become a preacher like his father. He went to Belgium and started preaching in coal mines, living with the poor, wearing rags, giving away everything. He wanted to suffer like them. He believed suffering was holy, but even there, he was rejected. The church said he was too extreme, too emotional, too unstable. He was sent away again. Vincent was now 27 years old. He had failed as a son, failed as a salesman, failed as a preacher, failed as a man. No job, no love, no future. But in this moment of complete failure, something new appeared. A voice inside him said, "Then I will be a painter." After being dismissed from the church mission in Belgium, Vincent wandered alone through the gray, cold streets of Borinage, a coal mining region. He had no job, no money, and no direction. But he had one thing left: a deep need to express something that words could no longer carry. He lived among the miners, men with blackened faces, coughing from dust, their hands cracked from work. He saw their wives washing clothes in freezing rivers. He saw children with bare feet and empty stomachs. He shared their food, slept on the floor, and wore the same torn clothes they did. The church called him too extreme, but he wasn't trying to impress anyone anymore. He just wanted to understand suffering, and more than that, to capture it. That's when a thought struck him. If he could not preach with words, maybe he could preach with colors. He began to draw the people he saw, the miners, the mothers, the hungry children, their tired eyes, their hard lives. His drawings were rough, simple, but honest. Every line carried feeling. And for the first time, Vincent felt that he was doing something real, something that came from his heart. He decided, I will become an artist. It was 1880. He was 27 years old. Most artists start young. He was beginning when others gave up. Vincent didn't have money for paint, brushes, or canvas. He used charcoal, pencils, and cheap paper. He taught himself anatomy, perspective, and shading by copying books and studying the Bible. He studied nature, the way light touched the fields, the way shadows moved across faces. He believed that to paint life, you must first live it. His first real mentor was his cousin by marriage, Anton Mauve, a professional painter in The Hague. Mauve helped him learn how to mix oil paints and prepare canvases. Vincent respected him deeply, but his relationship with him also became complicated, just like most relationships in his life. Because Vincent wasn't easy to handle. He was emotional, impatient, and obsessive. He could work for days without eating, then collapse from exhaustion. He wanted every painting to be perfect, not in technique, but in truth. Mauve once told him, "You have talent, Vincent, but you must learn to control your emotions." Vincent replied, "If I control my emotions, there will be no art." That was his truth. During his time in The Hague, Vincent met a woman named Clasina Maria Hornick, known as CN. She was a poor woman. She had been a seamstress, a prostitute, and a single mother of a small daughter. Most people looked down on her, but Vincent saw something different. He saw human pain, and he wanted to protect her. He invited Cyan and her daughter to live with him. He gave them food, a bed, and his care. He painted her many times, sometimes holding her child, sometimes sitting alone, sometimes sewing quietly by the window. For Vincent, it wasn't just love. It was compassion. He wanted to show that even the poorest people deserve dignity and beauty. But society didn't understand. His family was horrified. They said she was a disgrace. His father called the relationship sinful. Even his mentor Mauve stopped speaking to him. Vincent defended Cyan fiercely, but deep inside he was breaking again. After 2 years, the pressure became too heavy. He had no money, no support, and too much emotional weight. He left her. It destroyed him. But he also knew he couldn't help her if he couldn't even help himself. This heartbreak bled into his art. You can see it in his early paintings, filled with dark browns, blacks, and deep grays. They were heavy, sad, but full of truth. After leaving The Hague, Vincent returned to live with his parents in the Dutch village of Nieuwenen. He set up a small studio in their house and began painting the peasants and workers who lived nearby. His father still didn't believe in him. He thought painting was a childish dream. But Vincent worked harder than ever. He would wake up before dawn, walk for hours across the countryside, and study the faces of farmers and women working in the fields. He didn't want to paint rich people or pretty scenes. He wanted to paint reality, the sweat, the dust, the rough hands that fed the nation. In 1885, after 5 years of self-teaching and endless practice, Vincent created what he considered his first real masterpiece, The Potato Eaters. It shows a poor family sitting around a dimly lit table, eating potatoes with their hands. Their faces are rough, their skin is dark, their expressions tired. But there is warmth in their togetherness. Vincent said, "I wanted to show that these people have earned their food honestly. They have tilled the earth themselves." The painting was earthy, real, emotional, exactly what he wanted. But the art critics hated it. They called it ugly, unrefined, and poorly painted. Vincent was crushed, but not broken. He wrote to his brother Theo, "I would rather paint one honest face full of wrinkles than 100 smooth ones full of lies." That one sentence shows the essence of Van Gogh, a man who cared more about truth than perfection. Throughout these years, Vincent wrote hundreds of letters to his brother Theo. These letters are among the most beautiful ever written, full of emotions, dreams, doubts, and gratitude. Theo wasn't just his brother. He was his best friend, emotional support, and financial lifeline. Theo worked as an art dealer in Paris and sent Vincent small amounts of money every month so he could continue painting. In return, Vincent sent him paintings, sketches, and letters describing every feeling he had. He wrote about the way sunlight changed the colors of fields, about his loneliness, his anger, his love for art, and his fear of failure. It's because of these letters that today, we know exactly how Van Gogh thought and felt. But life in Nieuwenen wasn't peaceful. Vincent had problems everywhere he went. The villagers didn't like him. They thought he was strange. He often painted women in fields or inside cottages, and people spread rumors about him. His relationship with his father became worse every day. In 1885, tragedy struck. His father died suddenly of a heart attack. Vincent blamed himself. He thought his stubbornness and behavior had caused his father stress. He felt enormous guilt, but he expressed it not with tears, but with color. He began painting even more obsessively. Day after day, he stood in the cold, mixing paints with trembling hands, trying to turn sadness into something beautiful. But inside, he was still lost. He needed change. He needed new air, new light, new inspiration. By 1886, Vincent decided to leave his home and move to Paris, where his brother Theo lived. He wanted to see the modern art world, to meet other painters, to learn new styles. He believed that Paris would change his life. He packed his paints, brushes, and canvases, said goodbye to the small Dutch village that never understood him, and took the train toward the city that would shape the rest of his life. He didn't know it yet, but Paris would introduce him to color, friendship, rivalry, and the beginning of madness. Part 2. The Colors of Paris, 1886 to 1888. In February 1886, Vincent Van Gogh arrived in Paris, where his younger brother Theo was working as an art dealer. Theo welcomed him with open arms, but he was shocked. Vincent looked like a ghost. He was thin, pale, sickly. He had barely eaten. His clothes were worn out. But in his hands, he carried a small bag with what mattered most: his paintings. When Theo saw them, dark, heavy, brown-toned, he was silent. Because Paris was different now. The world of art had changed. A revolution was happening. Impressionism. At first, Vincent hated what he saw in Paris. Artists were painting bright pinks, blues, and yellows. They weren't focused on deep emotion or suffering. They were painting the beauty of the moment. He thought it was shallow, too easy, too happy. But then, something happened. He saw the works of Claude Monet, Edouard Manet, and Camille Pissarro, and his heart began to change. He saw how they painted light, not just objects. He saw how colors could sing, how shadows could glow, and how a painting could feel alive without being dark. He studied them quietly. He didn't copy. He absorbed. Slowly, his own work began to change completely. Instead of browns and blacks, he began using oranges, blues, greens, purples, and golds. He stopped painting peasants and started painting city streets, bridges, flowers, cafes, and self-portraits. In just 2 years, his style transformed so much that even Theo couldn't believe it. He began painting with faster strokes, using thick layers of paint, called impasto, creating texture, movement, and emotion in every brushstroke. He painted what he felt, not what he saw. His self-portraits became a mirror of his emotions. In one, his eyes look calm. In another, full of fire. In some, he looks like he hasn't slept in days. Because he hadn't. He worked constantly. Sometimes he painted 3 to 4 canvases a day. He barely ate, barely rested. He drank coffee and smoked constantly, just to keep going. Vincent once said, "I put my heart and soul into my work, and I lose my mind in the process." And that's exactly what was happening. Paris wasn't just about color. It was about connection. Theo introduced Vincent to a new world of artists. Many who were not yet famous but would become legends in the future. He met Paul Gauguin, intense, proud, and mysterious. Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, short, wild, and brilliant. Émile Bernard, young and experimental, Georges Seurat, the creator of pointillism. They all debated, argued, drank, and painted together. They sat in cafes, smoked cigarettes, discussed truth, beauty, light, religion, madness, and technique. But even here, Vincent struggled. He had strong opinions. He was emotional, direct, and often rude. He spoke honestly, but sometimes his honesty hurt people. Some artists loved him. Others avoided him. He didn't belong to any group. He was too intense, too much of a storm in a quiet room. But they all respected one thing. His passion was unstoppable. Even if they thought he was strange, they knew he was real. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing truth. During this time, Theo played a silent, heroic role. He paid for everything: Vincent's food, rent, paint, canvas, brushes, and medical treatment. Even when Vincent ignored him, argued with him, or disappeared for days, Theo stood by him. Theo even tried to sell Vincent's paintings to clients, but nobody bought them. They said, "Too messy, too emotional, too wild. He will never be successful." Theo wrote to friends, "My brother may be mad, but his madness is pure." Imagine the pain Theo must have felt, seeing the genius, but knowing the world was blind. As Vincent painted brighter colors, his soul grew darker. He became more isolated, more anxious, more obsessed. He drank heavily, mostly absinthe, a strong and dangerous alcohol. He barely ate. He worked all night, slept all day. He wrote hundreds of letters to Theo, filled with hope and despair in the same sentence. He was now 35 years old. He had no wife, no children, no fame, no peace. Only art, loneliness, and Theo. He started having hallucinations, hearing voices, and falling into deep depressions. But even as his mind broke, his paintings exploded with energy. By 1888, after 2 intense years, Vincent couldn't take Paris anymore. The noise, the chaos, the competition. It was too much. He needed quiet, sunlight, and space to breathe. So he packed his things, dozens of canvases, hundreds of brushes and paints, and left Paris. His destination: Arles, a small town in the south of France. A place of bright sun, yellow fields, olive trees, and blue skies. Vincent believed that in Arles, he would finally build his dream. A house where artists could live and paint together. He called it the Yellow House. He wanted to create an art family, a brotherhood. He believed that art was more powerful when shared. He didn't know it then, but Arles would be the most beautiful, the most creative, and also the most tragic chapter of his life. He arrived in Arles, a small town in the south of France, in February 1888. The streets were quiet. The sun was warm. The skies were clear. The fields stretched golden into the distance. This was the opposite of everything he had known. And for a moment, he felt peace. Vincent rented a small home at 2 Place Lamartine, a modest house with pale yellow walls. He painted the walls himself. He filled the rooms with his own paintings. He placed his easel by the window to catch the light. He called it the Yellow House. But it was more than just a home. It was a dream. His dream. He wanted this to become a place where artists could live together, paint together, share meals, argue about philosophy, and build a new kind of art movement, full of emotion and truth. This was going to be his artist's paradise. A new beginning, a family of colors. In the first few months, Vincent painted like a man possessed. He was overwhelmed by the light, the colors, the movement of the South. He began experimenting with bright yellows, fiery oranges, emerald greens, and soft purples. He painted the fields and wheat bending in the wind, the stone bridges warm from the sun, the night sky filled with swirling stars, his bedroom small and simple, filled with blue peace, the chairs, the boots, the coffee cups, every detail of life turned into emotion. But most famously, he painted sunflowers. A simple flower, but under Vincent's hand, it became something holy. The petals glowed, the stems leaned with movement, the colors shouted without words. He painted 7 versions of the sunflowers, each one different. Some full of life, some dying, some open, some closed. Because that's what he believed. Even dying flowers are beautiful. He once wrote, "The sunflower is mine, in a way." And he was right. Nobody had ever painted them like that before. And nobody ever would again. While Vincent painted day and night in Arles, Theo continued to support him from Paris. Money was tight. Critics still ignored Vincent. Paintings didn't sell. But Theo believed in his brother and wanted to help him build his artist community. So Theo wrote to another painter, a man named Paul Gauguin. Gauguin was proud, bold, confident, and very talented. He had lived in the Caribbean, painted with fire, and wanted to escape the cold art world of Paris. Theo offered him a deal. "Come live with my brother in Arles. Paint with him. I'll pay for your journey," and support Gauguin agreed. In October 1888, Paul Gauguin arrived in Arles. Vincent was excited, more than excited. He had spent months preparing the yellow house, painting new canvases, arranging the furniture, even decorating Gauguin's room with sunflowers. To Vincent, Gauguin wasn't just a guest. He was the beginning of the family he had always dreamed of. For a short while, it was magical. The 2 men painted side by side. They walked through fields together, debated art, painted portraits of each other, drank wine, and worked late into the night. But underneath the surface, trouble was growing. Vincent and Gauguin were very different people. Vincent was emotional, sensitive, fragile. Gauguin was tough, proud, distant. Vincent wanted to share ideas. Gauguin wanted to be the leader. Vincent saw painting as a way to show love. Gauguin saw it as a way to show power. Their arguments became louder, their moods darker. Vincent became paranoid. He feared Gauguin would abandon him, like everyone else had. But he also loved Gauguin like a brother. He admired him. He wanted to be understood by him. That mix of love and fear made everything dangerous. On December 23, 1888, the storm broke. That night, nobody knows exactly what happened, but the results were unforgettable. Vincent and Gauguin had a violent argument. Some say it was about art. Some say it was about money. Some say it was about love, even jealousy. Gauguin left the yellow house, walking away into the night. Vincent, heartbroken and alone, collapsed. Then, in a moment of pure emotional and mental breakdown, Vincent took a razor and cut off his own left ear. Not a scratch, not a cut. He sliced off the whole ear. He then wrapped it in cloth, walked down the street to a nearby brothel, and handed it to a woman named Rachel, saying, "Keep this carefully." Then he collapsed from blood loss and shock. He was found the next morning, barely alive, and taken to the hospital. News spread across Arles. The mad painter has mutilated himself. Gauguin left immediately. He never returned. The yellow house, Vincent's dream of community, was shattered. Vincent stayed in the hospital for weeks. He was diagnosed with acute mania with generalized delirium. In today's words, That might mean bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, or severe depression with psychosis. But in 1888, no one truly understood. The town of Arles now feared him. They signed a petition saying he should be locked up. He was no longer the artist. He was the madman. But even in the hospital, he painted. He painted the doctors, the walls, the patients, the gardens. He painted with his bandaged head, trembling hands, and a broken spirit. Because he didn't know how to survive without art. During this period, he wrote some of his most emotional letters to Theo. He apologized. He cried on paper. He begged for forgiveness. He tried to explain the storm in his mind, but even he didn't understand it. He wrote, "I am not mad, or at least not always, but sometimes the darkness is louder than the light." Theo never gave up. He never blamed him. He simply said, "Paint when you can. Rest when you can't. I will be here." That love, pure, unconditional, kept Vincent alive. In January 1889, Vincent was allowed to return home. But it wasn't the same. The yellow house now felt empty, haunted. His neighbors avoided him. Children ran away when he walked by. He tried to paint again, but the silence inside the house was too loud. The dream was dead. The family he imagined had vanished. He knew he couldn't stay. So in May 1889, Vincent made a decision that shocked even Theo. He voluntarily admitted himself into a mental hospital, not because he was forced, but because he was afraid of himself. He went to Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, a former monastery turned into an asylum. It was quiet, surrounded by gardens, fields, and stone corridors. He brought his paints with him, and there, in that silent place, he created miracles. Part 3, The Starry Night and the Storm Within, 1889 to 1890. The gates of Saint Paul de Moselle Asylum closed behind him in May 1889. Vincent Van Gogh entered not as a prisoner, but as a man who was terrified of what his own mind might do next. The asylum stood outside the small town of Saint-Rémy-de-Provence, in the south of France. Once it had been a monastery. Now it was home to about 30 men suffering from mental illness. Thick stone walls kept the world out, and the patients in. The rooms were small, with iron bars across the windows. At night, the wind howled through the olive trees outside, echoing like ghosts. But Vincent did something no one expected. Instead of despairing, he made the asylum his studio. His cell was bare, a bed, a chair, a small table. But from the narrow window, he could see the gardens, and beyond them, the hills of Provence. That small rectangle of sky became his universe. He was allowed to walk outside under supervision, so he studied the olive groves, the cypress trees, the wheat fields, and the blue mountains in the distance. Every day he carried his paints, brushes, and easel into the courtyard. The other patients watched him quietly, some talking to themselves, some staring into space. But Vincent was calm when he painted. It was the only time his mind stopped shouting. He wrote to Theo, "I feel calm when I paint. The suffering passes, and I feel harmony again." At first, he painted what he saw directly around him. The garden of the asylum, full of irises and roses. The long corridors echoing with footsteps. The doctors and attendants who cared for him. He painted self-portraits again, dozens of them, because, as he said, "I have no other model." In each portrait, his expression changed, sometimes weary, sometimes fierce, sometimes peaceful, sometimes afraid. He was recording his soul, not his face. He painted the irises with purple petals twisting in every direction, alive and wild. He painted olive trees that seemed to dance in the wind, their branches curling like flames. He painted the cypresses, tall and dark, reaching toward heaven like black fire. Those paintings weren't quiet landscapes. They were his inner storms made visible. One night, unable to sleep, Vincent looked out of his barred window. The sky was alive, not flat or still, but moving. The stars seemed to spin and pulse. The moon glowed like a lantern, and the wind made the trees sway like waves in an ocean of air. He stared for hours. Then he turned to his canvas. What he painted that night became one of the most famous images in the world. The starry night. It wasn't a realistic sky. It was the sky as Vincent felt it. The energy, the motion, the fire behind the calm. He used thick swirls of blue and white, golden stars bursting like suns, a crescent moon, a dark cypress rising like a question, and below it all, a small, silent village asleep under the cosmic storm. In the painting, the stars seem alive, and the earth seems still. Exactly how Vincent felt inside. His mind was chaos. The world outside was peace. So he reversed them. He wrote to Theo. Why, I ask myself, shouldn't the shining dots of the sky be as accessible as the black dots on the map of France? Just as we take the train to go to Tarascon or Rouen, we take death to go to a star. That one line shows how he thought, not with despair, but with wonder. Even when his life was breaking, he still believed in light. But the peace never lasted. There were days when he couldn't paint at all. He had violent seizures, what doctors called epileptic fits. He would collapse, shake, and wake up confused. Sometimes he tore his own clothes, screamed, or refused to eat. He was haunted by voices, by nightmares, by loneliness. Yet even after each episode, he went back to work. He didn't destroy his madness. He painted through it. He wrote to Theo, I am unable to describe exactly what is wrong with me. There are moments when I am terribly anxious and I don't know why. But I must go on working as if nothing had happened. That sentence alone defines his genius. He kept painting even when he didn't trust his mind. Throughout his time in Saint-Rémy, Vincent wrote over 150 letters to Theo. They are some of the most tender letters ever written between two brothers. He described each painting in detail, the colors, the brushstrokes, the mood. He told Theo how the cypresses fascinated him, how the wheat fields made him think of eternity, how he felt trapped yet strangely alive. And always, he thanked Theo for his patience and money. Theo, in return, kept encouraging him. He promised that one day people would see Vincent's worth. He sent him supplies, words of love, and sometimes paintings from other artists so Vincent could study them. This connection was Vincent's only thread to the outside world, his only proof that someone still cared. During that single year in the asylum, he produced more than 150 paintings, an almost impossible number given his illness. Among them were The Starry Night, Wheat Field with Cypresses, the olive trees, irises, the garden of the asylum, Self-Portrait with Bandaged Ear, The Reaper, The Sour. Each of these works glows with movement, skies swirling, fields vibrating, trees twisting. It was as if his brush was breathing. Every painting was both a prayer and a scream. Doctors noticed that when he painted, his mind seemed clear. So they encouraged him to continue. Painting became his therapy, his medicine, his reason to stay alive. By early 1890, Vincent's condition improved slightly. He was calmer, more focused, and longed to see the world again. He missed the sound of people, the smell of Paris, and above all, he missed Theo, who had just become a father to a baby boy, Vincent Van Gogh, named after him. When Vincent read Theo's letter telling him that his nephew would carry his name, he cried. He felt, perhaps for the first time, that his life had meant something. But there was also a quiet fear. Theo's health was failing. He was overworked and poor. He wrote that the Paris air was heavy, his wife was tired, and money was scarce. Vincent felt guilty. He thought he was a burden. He wrote, "If I could be of some worth, if only to ease your burden, I should be glad to do so. But it seems I am fit for nothing." Still, he wanted to try again. He asked the doctors if he could leave the asylum and paint in freedom once more. After a year of treatment, they agreed. In May 1890, Vincent left Saint-Rémy. He carried with him his paints, his canvases, and his endless hunger for light. Part 4. The Final Days and the Immortal Legacy, 1890 and beyond. When Vincent van Gogh stepped out of the train at Auvers-sur-Oise in May 1890, the air smelled of wheat and rain. The village lay just a short ride from Paris, but felt like another world. Quiet, green, full of winding lanes and gentle hills. After a year inside the asylum at Saint-Rémy, the wide-open sky felt like freedom itself. He carried only a small bag, a few shirts, sketchbooks, brushes, paints, and canvases. Everything else he owned, every dream, every wound, was inside him. Vincent found a room at Auberge Ravoux, a simple inn run by Arthur Gustave Ravoux and his family. His tiny room was under the roof. One window, a wooden bed, a narrow table, and a chair. It cost him 3.5 francs a day, including meals. He paid with money Theo sent every month. Just across the village lived Dr. Paul Gachet, a physician who treated artists. He was eccentric, with long hair and deep eyes, but he truly cared for painters. Dr. Gachet loved art. His house was filled with paintings and the smell of turpentine. Theo had written ahead, begging him to watch over his brother. When Vincent met Gachet, he liked him immediately. "He is as ill and as nervous as I am," he joked in a letter. "But at least he is a friend." Gachet encouraged him to paint the gardens, the roofs, the wheat fields, anything that calmed his mind. Those last weeks were a storm of creation. In barely 70 days, Vincent produced more than 70 paintings, almost one every day. He painted with fury and peace at the same time, as if racing against something invisible. He painted the church at Auvers, rising like a blue shadow against the sky. Wheat field with crows, where the yellow earth meets a dark, stormy horizon. Portrait of Dr. Gachet, with hands folded and eyes full of melancholy. Thatched cottages, the town hall, the White House at night, and countless fields of wheat bending in the wind. Locals often stopped to watch him work. They saw a man with fiery red hair, straw hat, and a worn blue coat, standing for hours under the sun. Sometimes he muttered to himself. Sometimes he sang. He never seemed tired. He told Dr. Gachet, "I feel calm here. The countryside is very beautiful. I could work here forever." But forever was close. Vincent still wrote letters almost every day to Theo, who was now married and had a baby son, Vincent Willem. He was proud that the child carried his name. But beneath the joy, he felt guilt. He knew Theo's finances were collapsing. Art sales were poor, his health was failing, and he had a wife and child to care for. Vincent wrote, "I risk my life for my work, and my reason has half foundered in it." And later, "What can I do, my dear brother, except go on? I cannot be other than I am." Theo begged him to rest, but Vincent couldn't. He painted like a man who knew time was short. He told people, "I am trying to do as much as I can before the light fades." Though his letters sounded calmer, his inner world was restless. He was plagued by sudden waves of sadness and fear that no one could explain. Sometimes he spoke normally. Other times, he fell into long silences. He walked through the wheat fields alone for hours, staring at the horizon. To the villagers, he seemed strange but harmless. A quiet man who always painted. Children followed him curiously. Adults nodded politely but whispered about the crazy Dutchman. He began to worry that Theo might lose his job and be unable to support him. He believed he was a burden, the same thought that had chased him since youth. The more he painted, the more he felt he was painting against his own despair. That Sunday morning was bright and warm. Vincent left the inn after lunch, carrying his paints and a revolver, probably borrowed from the innkeeper for scaring birds. He walked to the vast wheat fields outside the village. The sun glowed over the golden heads of grain, and crows wheeled in the air. He set up his easel. Nobody knows exactly what happened next. At some point that evening, a gunshot echoed across the fields. Later, as the sun went down, the painter was seen staggering back toward the village, holding his stomach. He had been shot in the chest. He climbed the narrow stairs to his small room and collapsed on his bed. When the innkeeper rushed to him, Vincent whispered, "I wanted to kill myself." They called for Dr. Gachet. The bullet had missed his heart but lodged deep in his body. Surgery was impossible. He was in terrible pain, but calm. Gachet asked if he was suffering. Vincent said softly, "The sadness will last forever." A telegram was sent to Paris. Theo dropped everything and took the first train to Auvers. When he reached the inn the next morning, he found his brother lying in bed, pale and breathing heavily, his hands stained with paint. They spoke quietly for hours. Vincent told Theo not to blame anyone, that he had done it himself. He asked about his nephew, about Jo, Theo's wife, about the baby. Theo held his hand, weeping. Late that night, around 1 a.m. on July 29, 1890, Vincent took one last deep breath and died in his brother's arms. He was 37 years old. Theo wrote later, "He wanted to die in peace, and I, who loved him, had to let him go." 2 days later, on July 30th, the people of Auvers carried Vincent's coffin to the small village cemetery. It was covered with sunflowers, wildflowers, and yellow dahlias. His canvases were placed against the walls around him. Artists, villagers, and friends stood silently. Dr. Gachet delivered a short speech. He was a great artist, more an artist than all of us together. He had only one desire, to express what was in his heart. Theo stood by the grave, unable to speak. When the coffin was lowered, the air was heavy with the smell of wheat and paint. After Vincent's death, Theo's health collapsed completely. He was exhausted, depressed, and heartbroken. He wrote letters saying he heard his brother's voice in his dreams. Within 6 months, he became severely ill and was taken to a hospital in the Netherlands. On January 25, 1891, barely half a year after Vincent's death, Theo Van Gogh also died, at the age of 33. He was buried in Utrecht. Later, in 1914, Theo's wife, Jo Van Gogh Bonger, arranged for his body to be reburied next to Vincent in Auvers-sur-Oise. Today, the two brothers rest side by side, their graves covered with ivy, under the same open sky they both loved. After losing both men she loved, Jo inherited hundreds of Vincent's paintings and letters. She could have sold them cheaply or hidden them away. Instead, she made it her life's mission to show the world who Vincent truly was. She organized exhibitions, translated and published the letters of Vincent van Gogh, and tirelessly promoted his art. Through her, people began to see not the madman, but the visionary. By the early 1900s, critics finally understood his genius. Collectors paid attention. His paintings appeared in museums. One by one, the canvases that had been laughed at or ignored became treasures. 30 years after his death, his name spread across Europe. By mid-century, he was taught in every art school. Today, his works are valued in hundreds of millions of dollars, hanging in the world's greatest museums: the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, the Musée d'Orsay in Paris, the Metropolitan Museum in New York. But more important than the money or fame is what his art represents: honesty, emotion, courage, and beauty born from suffering. He painted the way he felt, not the way he was told. He proved that even when life is filled with pain, the soul can still create light. Vincent van Gogh's life was not a failure. It was a lesson, a reminder that value doesn't always arrive during life. He died believing no one cared, yet his work now comforts millions. Every brushstroke was a heartbeat, every color a cry for understanding. He gave us a way to see the world not as it is, but as it feels. He taught that beauty can exist inside sadness, that a single person, no matter how broken, can change the way humanity sees everything. Imagine the scene of his final painting. A wheat field, the sky split by black crows, paths that lead nowhere. Some see it as a vision of death. Others see it as freedom. Perhaps it was both. The crows were flying home. The wheat was ready for harvest. He had finished his journey. And as the wind moved across the field, the stalks of wheat bent and shimmered. The same golden light that once fell on a boy in the Netherlands. The same light that filled the walls of a yellow house. The same light that still glows from every painting he left behind. More than a century later, people still stand before his paintings and cry. They see themselves, their loneliness, their hopes, their storms. They realize that genius is not perfection. It is truth expressed with heart. Vincent van Gogh lived poor, sick, and unseen, but he taught the world that to feel deeply is not a weakness. It is art, and that is why his name will never fade. He did not just paint Starry Night. He painted what it feels like to be alive. Vincent van Gogh never gave up, even when the world gave up on him. He failed in school. He failed in love. He failed in business, in religion, in friendship. But he never stopped searching for what was real. And when he found painting, he held on, not for money, not for fame, but because it was the only way he could stay alive. He didn't paint for galleries. He painted to breathe. He painted when his hands shook. He painted when his mind collapsed. He painted when nobody believed in him. Except one person, Theo. And that's one lesson we must never forget. Sometimes one person believing in you is enough. Enough to survive. Enough to keep creating. Enough to leave a mark on the world. Vincent taught us that you can be poor and still give something priceless. That you can feel broken and still create something whole. That you can die unseen and still become eternal. And most of all, he showed us that you don't have to be perfect to matter. You just have to be honest. honest with your heart, honest with your voice, honest with your pain. Because someone, somewhere, one day, will finally understand. If this story touched your heart, if you learned something about art, about pain, or about life itself, then subscribe to this channel. We don't just tell stories, we share truth. We help you learn English with emotion, and we remind you that your story matters too. Thank you for being here. And remember, even in the darkest night, someone is painting stars for you. Subscribe now. Your journey is just beginning.